We've teamed up with the Wormhole Foundation, stewards of the Wormhole Protocol, the leading interoperability platform powering cross-chain transfers for 200 plus multi-chain teams. Claim your unique Wormhole NFT just for 0x Research listeners today. Pear is an innovative pair trading exchange built on top of Simio. Users can trade trending narratives with one click, from blue chip narratives such as long BTC, short ETH, right to the whiff versus bonk. The hat stays on. Simio's intent-centric architecture enables deep liquidity, source off-chain, and broad on-chain, and combined with Pear, has democratized access to complex trading strategies typically reserved for institutional traders. Marinade is a staking protocol on Solana, and the only stake pool that delivers auto rebalancing, MEV rewards, and automatic downside protection with new protected staking rewards. Optimize your SOL stake with Marinade by hitting the link below.
Avalanche is a smart contract platform that has a novel consensus protocol, subnet infrastructure, and the Hyper SDK toolkit, which allows Web3 developers to easily launch custom, powerful blockchain solutions. You can start building today by checking out the link below.
Before we get into today's episode, just a quick disclaimer. The views expressed on this podcast by either myself or any guest are their personal views and do not represent the views of any associated organization. Nothing in this episode should be construed or relied upon as financial, technical, tax, legal, or other advice. All right, let's jump into the episode.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 0x Research. Today we have a great episode lined up with Matt and Billy from Intuition, a decentralized identity protocol. Today is Thursday, April 23rd. But this episode will likely go live on the 9th of May. As a reminder, be sure to use code OXResearch10 at Blockworks Research for 10% off your subscription. On to the interview with Matt and Billy. Thanks for coming on, guys. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you guys for having us. Really excited for this.
Before we get started, do you guys want to introduce yourselves and then dive into what decentralized identity is and why we need it?
Absolutely. MK, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. My name is Matt. I head up operations and strategy at Intuition. I've been involved there, I guess, since late Q4 last year, but actually was an investor in the initial builders round over a year before that. I guess I found my way into crypto seriously late 2016. I ran Blockhead Capital from June of 2018 up through the very end of last year. Part of InternDAO, and along the way kind of had an opportunity to choose, how I want to spend my time and what I want to do most, and a luxury that I think I was grateful for and very mindful with making that decision. And I decided that working with Intuition full time on the vision that Billy has set forward was probably the single best use of my time. So I'm really excited to talk about what we've been cooking on.
Heck yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Billy. I've been in crypto for a while. Been involved with Ethereum since 2014. Helped start the blockchain consulting practice at Ernst & Young back in the day. Transitioned over to Consensus after that. I've been at Consensus for 7 years. I'm still a special advisor to Consensus. Did a bunch of things over that time, one of which was decentralized identity. And so whenever I kind of architect systems, I think about them from like the lens of decentralized identity, just because it's kind of this foundational pillar upon which to build things correctly, I believe. And so Intuition kind of came about height of the last cycle when I was doing a ton of angel investing and advisory work. And just a little bit of a backstory to frame where this came from, because it also helps frame where it goes and helps frame what Intuition is. So in that angel investing advisory stuff, my unique value prop to people is, hey, I've been in crypto for over 10 years. Let me connect the dots for you. Let me tell you who's come before, who exists now, best practices, tooling, things like that. And that works great, but I was on a lot of calls all the time, and I didn't really like the calls. And so I was like, ooh, how can I disintermediate myself here a little bit? And so what I did was I exported like my mind map of Web3 into this visual knowledge graph that you could go and navigate yourself. So instead of needing to come to me to ask me like, hey, do you know someone from this layer 2 team that you could make an intro to, you could just go to the knowledge graph and find that information for yourself. And that worked great. I started using this knowledge graph to keep track of all of my own information, because before this I had 1,000 browser tabs open, like a million bookmarks that I still have never gone back to this day, although I would never use my bookmarks. I use Roam Research to take notes, and I tag things with things sometimes, but it just doesn't really work well for me for that purpose. So I just started using this tool to keep track of my own stuff. And in keeping track of it for me, it by proxy kept track of it for everyone else. It kept track of it for my portcos and my clients and my friends onboarding to Web3 who didn't even know what wallet to use. And so I thought, this is very cool, but it's just my knowledge in the knowledge graph. So what if it wasn't that? What if it was everyone's knowledge in the knowledge graph? And what if people were incentivized to add good data to the knowledge graph? That'd be pretty interesting. So I didn't really know how to do that at the time. And I just kind of got obsessed with the idea and started technically architecting it. And what it started to look like was this composition of all of these various decentralized identity and data and finance perimeters that have been really maturing and emerging over the past couple of years. And so while decentralized identity is kind of like a cornerstone of what we're doing, and we kind of oftentimes get framed into that category, it's just kind of like a dependency of the system that we want to build. So that's a little bit about me and where intuition came from.
Interesting. Just thinking of that knowledge graph, I think one thing that I want to ask is how does while I was reading over your articles, you wrote about this quite a bit, is neutrality in knowledge and adding new knowledge in. So we'll get more into this later, but I kind of before, when you were thinking about this, what was the first thing that you thought of, how you could kind of make this work that way?
Yeah, the credibly neutral piece is interesting because everything that we interact with on the web is relatively opinionated, whether we know it is or not, or want it to be or not. And so if you're building something as generalistic as we're doing, which is kind of this low level protocol that's hopefully going to be leveraged by all applications across the web, you can't really get opinionated. You can't really censor. You can't really say what's true or false or right or wrong. Otherwise, you enter this very slippery slope of censorship. And so the really, you just touched on the hardest part of building something like this, because it's okay, if anyone can add anything to the knowledge graph, how do you distill the signal from the noise? How do you determine which data is true and which data is false? And the answer is you don't. And this is where people get hung up. And I think that's why maybe this hasn't been built before, is the protocol shouldn't. The protocol and intuition will never say what is true or false or right or wrong. All we do is let people say things about things in a more structured format and maybe provide more incentives for people to express themselves in different ways. But where the distillation of the data needs to happen is higher up the stack. It needs to come from other things built on top that filter the data. And so the most primitive example of something that could kind of be overlaid on top of the data is, it's I only want to listen to these 10 people. Let's say I'm viewing a smart contract and there's been claims made about the smart contract. I don't care what everyone else in the ecosystem has said. Maybe I only care what the 10 smart contract auditors that I trust have said about the smart contract. Or, on Twitter, anyone can say anything on Twitter about anyone pretty much. But you only listen to the voices that you trust. And so while anyone can say anything, that's the way you filter the data. You don't censor people. You just kind of let people pick and choose whose voices they want to listen to and who or what they want to trust. And you filter the data a little bit higher up the stack that way. And so in that way, we remain credibly neutral as intuition. Maybe we develop some rudimentary kind of algorithms to help you filter the data and rudimentary tools and middleware. But we don't want to be the only people distilling the data, because you become the gatekeepers of truth. And then you are deciding what is true or false or right or wrong. And I don't think that any centralized entity should do that. It should be up to you and the wisdom of the crowds to kind of come to social consensus around what is true or false, using very good tools that are now available to you that make that process easier, as opposed to being spoon-fed a single side of what might be a controversial issue.
That's super interesting. I guess a question I have to extrapolate on that further is, so for example, you would have the 10 smart contract auditors you care about a test for a contract you're looking to interact with. How do you get someone like that to contribute to intuition? What does that contribution look like? Is this a front end on a website? And since we're in crypto, I'm assuming there would be some sort of incentive to bring all this data into the protocol.
Yeah. So let me try to tackle those one at a time. So a reason an auditor might want to do it is because maybe they want the fact that they've audited a thing to be a little bit more publicly visible. Maybe it's because of clout. Maybe it's because of, I don't know, general discoverability. Maybe this is a good platform for publishing information once it exists. Maybe the project has requested that they do publish it to Intuition. And the reason you might want to publish it to Intuition is because it's this neutral data layer that any app can tap into. And so like at the point of interaction with a smart contract in MetaMask or Rabi or something, you can have the fact that the thing is audited right there at the point of interaction. You don't have to like go to the website and then click on the link to go to the GitHub to go to the PDF and then download the PDF and look at the audit report to know that it's audited. You can have like a verifiable claim coming from the auditor saying, yes, we audited this. So like that's maybe, and maybe it's because they want to help secure the ecosystem. There's many reasons people might want to do it, but that's kind of a couple of them. And then the way that they would do that, a couple different ways. So again, we're kind of like, we're building at all layers of the stack. The main meat of this is the protocol, but I guess it's the protocol and the middleware. But we're also building at the application layer to make the UX easy and to exemplify what you can build on top of the middleware and the protocol now that it exists. And so like the auditor could come to like our Intuition Systems portal and just like manually enter the information there, or they could just like integrate with it in like whatever system they have. And maybe they like, I don't know how they publish audit reports right now, but maybe at the time of publication, it also just like publishes an attestation to the Intuition knowledge graph. And it's kind of more programmatic than manual entry. So you kind of have both options. On the incentive piece, it's like I think when people hear the word incentives, their minds often go straight to economics, but I think that's only like a piece of the puzzle, and economic incentives are very important, and we have those baked into our system as well, and I'm happy to touch on those later. But it's like there's many different pillars of there's like levers you can pull to get people to do different things, and we've kind of boxed them into 4 categories, and at least I have in my mind. And it's like you've got reputational, you've got educational, you've got like functional / utility, and then you have economic. And so for any one of those 4 reasons, like each individually in their own silo, if like they are explained, will probably make a little bit of sense, and then there'll be gaps. You're like, oh, what if this? But when you view all 4 of those in their entirety holistically, then it starts to be a really compelling picture of like why someone might want to do a thing. Matt, anything that you want to add on that front?
Yeah, it's the incentive part that I think deserves a little bit of zooming in. Like the question is, why will some actor who operates in the status quo do something outside of the status quo? Like why would an auditor decide to publish on Intuition? And I think what we first have to do is more closely examine like the current paradigm around data, in that data is property of a handful of large tech companies. It's not accessible. You create it for them for free. And all of the economic value that flows through that data or that belongs to that data is captured by the intermediary. So if you think about this in terms of like economics, like this is not a free and open like economic or capitalistic system. It's like a very tightly controlled, centrally controlled, most likely very poor allocation of resources. It's almost like each large tech company is kind of like a command economy in its own right, which is how it can get to the size that it got to as fast as possible. But that's also why we have all these really weird unintended consequences where essentially our experience of the physical world and our interaction in the digital world have like diverged so drastically due to poor quality data, among other things, that the digital experience is like starting to like pull the physical experience in these all sorts of crazy directions that we're viewing all the time, right? So what we have to do is we have to reimagine sort of like, and I hate to use this word because it's like such a big word, but it's like you're almost having this digital economic revolution. And we know that because we're in crypto and we know how powerful these like crypto economic tokens are as coordination tools for human behavior. And it's like, well, okay, what happens if we can find a better flow of value as it relates to data? What if value can get to the endpoints, to the curators, to the creators, to the owners? What does that look like? And like, that's what gets me really, really excited, because like, why should somebody do something against the status quo? Why should they publish on Intuition? Because like, there's a clear future. And like, in one way or one protocol, like we will get there inevitably. So I just think that like, as far as I'm concerned, like Intuition is probably one of the further out there, more in the lead groups to do so, even though they've been sort of under wraps as long as they have been.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you see like X and how they're moving towards like monetization of accounts based on your impressions, et cetera. It's like you port that to a decentralized system in crypto built on Intuition or something similar, and then you see what the result is and what sort of economies of scale that can result from having so much data right there. That's excellent quality.
Absolutely. You're seeing confirmation of the thesis everywhere. There was that Twitch YouTube spat about how much money gets to the creators. There's OpenAI using that like open methodology, and Microsoft have to pen that letter saying if we don't use some form of like open development, like we're just going to fall behind. Like there is clearly a trend towards you need to be open source to iterate more quickly, and you need to direct more economic value away from the central company and towards those people doing the actual work. So like, while we might be the extreme interpretation of that today, like in my opinion, that's probably the standard a decade from now. I don't know if any of you heard the most recent interview with one of the Telegram founders. I think it was on Tucker Carlson, but they keep a small team, small core team, no HR department, and 4 times a year they do a like open source, come build on us, and we give you prizes if you're great. And like they have 900 million active users. So like, in my opinion, it's very clear what the future holds. And it's very clear that like there will be certain types of disruptions to the current paradigm. So I think like there will be sort of intangible forces that are probably too many to enumerate that are like, oh yeah, like this needs to be published on Intuition, like, because like that's just like how things are working now.
Yeah, agreed. I think like it also clicked for a lot more people when Reddit had they had a similar issue where they were selling their data and then they weren't paying users, obviously. And I think like that's when it clicked for, I'd say like, I don't want to say normies, but for normies, I think that was the moment where it was like, this is not great.
Yeah, it's always been the case in the history of the web where we are kind of willingly and unwittingly digital slaves to these platforms, where we are working for free to create data for them to then monetize. And so like we really need to, there should be value extracted by the intermediaries. Like you can't completely disintermediate, because then you don't have the platforms to do the interacting. So there is definite value in the platform, but they're just extracting disproportionate amounts of value from the system right now. It's just like in crypto, where at the beginning of crypto, or at least at the beginning of Ethereum, it was always like, okay, well, if everything's open source, how are any of these companies going to make any money, or how are they going to be valuable? Because the money is just going to flow directly to the user. And what ended up happening is like, there's value in the user experience. There's value in like the services provided. Like there's so much in the middle that is valuable. It's just that the value flows are incorrect right now. And it's just like entirely disproportionate in the favor of the intermediary. And so just like everything else happening across crypto, we have to do that for data. And so that's what we're trying to do, is like extrapolate that concept out to the concept of data, which is our most valuable resource. Like it is the oil of the internet. And so like, I think it's kind of crazy that there's not more people thinking about this yet, even though, to your point, like it's becoming more and more prevalent, even for everyday people, as like these things hit the headlines and people become aware of the fact that like their data is the thing that fuels these platforms, even though they are the ones creating the data in the first place.
Wormhole is the leading interoperability platform for multi-chain bridges and applications. With over 1 billion messages sent and 40 billion in value transferred, Wormhole leads the industry in cross-chain message volume and total value transferred. If you're a builder, Wormhole has an extensive suite of tools and infrastructure to securely build multi-chain applications. You can use Wormhole to power DeFi, NFTs, governance, and so much more. And Wormhole supports over 30 blockchains and 6 different runtimes. Claim your unique Wormhole NFT just for 0x Research listeners today. Fill out a form, Proof that you've listened to today's episode to receive a Pro app, and you'll get an email over the coming weeks to claim your limited edition NFT. Pear is an innovative pair trading exchange built on top of Simio. Users can trade trending narratives with one click, from blue chip narratives such as long BTC, short ETH, right to the WIF versus bonk. The hat stays on. Simio's intent-centric architecture enables deep liquidity, source off-chain, and broad on-chain, and combined with Pear, has democratized access to complex trading strategies typically reserved for institutional traders. Marinade is optimized Solana staking. Stake natively or liquid stake with Marinade and get the same high-performance delegation strategy that thousands are using today to stake your SOL to over 100 of the best Solana validators. The delegation strategy is a first of its kind and only possible on Solana. It delegates your SOL to the network's best validators with no smart contract risk. In addition, Marinade has just built a new and improved delegation strategy that delivers maximum performance with auto-rebalancing, MEV rewards, and automatic downside protection with new protected staking rewards. And this allows for maximum decentralization for Solana too. Optimize your SOL staking today with Marinade by hitting the link below.
The age of interoperability is here. With the launch of Teleporter, Avalanche becomes a seamlessly linked network of many sovereign blockchains that communicate so smoothly they feel like a single chain. Teleporter is an EVM-compatible cross-chain communication protocol built on top of Avalanche Port Messaging. It allows any EVM chain on Avalanche to send messages, assets, and data to one another in a simple, fast, affordable, and secure way. Teleporter and Avalanche Port Messaging provide a new foundation for how Avalanche blockchains can communicate and how developers can easily build cross-chain applications out of the box. Build anything you want, any way you want, on the eco-friendly blockchain designed for Web3 devs. Check it out by clicking the link below. Taking a step back, Billy, you kind of talked about the three layers of the protocol, or I guess it's the application layer, the middleware, and the protocol. Could you kind of dive into those a little bit deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the protocol layer, what you basically have is something. It's a knowledge graph, and you can think of the architecture akin to something like a neural network, where you just have nodes and edges. That's all you have. Each node and each edge has an identity, and each of those identities has properties. So it's kind of like knowledge property graph. And so at the protocol layer, what we try to do is we try to incentivize the expression of data into that knowledge graph in a very neutral and unopinionated way. And so at the protocol layer, it's just the system of tools that resolves to some state that you can interpret in different ways and use for different purposes. So that's kind of like the lowest level, is just this kind of hopefully as open source as possible thing. Obviously contracts will be open source, and there's things that technologically are not feasible to open source right now when you're dealing with very large data sets, but we need to make them as decentralized as possible. So that's what I think of as the protocol layer, is this knowledge graph. And the way that just going a little bit deeper there, you can think of it like a composition of all of these verifiable data registries. And so it's not like we're creating the Intuition database that all the data is stored on. It's we're this semantic mapping on top of all of these databases. It doesn't matter which database you want to use. We prefer that it's a verifiable data registry like IPFS or Arweave or Ceramic, or any blockchain is a verifiable data registry. So you kind of have all these databases down here, and then we're this semantic mapping on top that allows you to discover the data. So that's kind of the protocol layer. Now the middleware layer is how you interpret that data and how you work with the data. So as a developer and as an end user, you probably don't want to deal with the raw knowledge graph, which hopefully at some point has billions of entries, trillions. I don't know. The goal is to consume the world's data. So you don't want to look at the raw data. If I go to Matt's profile and he has 35 billion data points, I really don't want to just look at that. I want that distilled in some way. And so we need to build tools for developers to build user experiences on top of the data, where they don't have to build the tools themselves to work with the data. So it's really, the middleware, I'd say, is really about creating a very good developer experience. At the application layer, that's where, we hope that developers will contribute to all layers of the stack, but that's really where we see the developers shining, where we don't want to be the ones building things largely at the application layer. The goal is to have Intuition integrated everywhere and have people building stuff on top And so our approach to the application layer is, it's what I saw at the beginning of like Ethereum and Uport days. It's like, if you just build the protocol and the middleware, people don't really know what to do with those tools until you show them what they can do. And so our approach there is, let's just build some example apps on top that show developers like, hey, this is what you might want to do with this tool now that it exists. And we kind of, we have a lot of product minded people. And so I think we're hopefully building some really compelling user experiences at the application layer. But over time, our hope is to trend away from being like this B2C model and become like more of a B2B model, where we're just like serving the tools to developers to build amazing user experiences on top. Matt, again, anything to add on that front?
Always generally something to add. It's that middleware layer that, and again, I think I'm going to just probably continually take us from like these really grounded conversations and like into where the world is headed, because I think that's probably like the most important conversation to have, at least in my opinion. So data has long been known as like the oil of the internet. And like, I don't disagree with it at all, but like that's a crude form of a commodity, right? Like for oil to go to market, like it needs to be refined. It needs to be turned into like consumable product. And with the advent of AI, and with AI being now the largest consumer of data, like the way we need to think about data needs to completely change, especially because we've gotten to a point now where AI has consumed so much data that it's running out of data. And like there's been some really interesting talks given about AI models creating artificial data sets to train itself on, because it just needs more data, which is like a whole crazy rabbit hole. So like in AI, there's a term like called inference, and it's sort of like the statistical like mapping, or like the statistics of how the data relates to each other. And like these inferences are like way more valuable because you can do things with them. So like if you sort of think about like this middleware layer of intuition, like data is potentially becoming worthless if not made like consumable. So by sort of thinking through the ways in which app developers would want to, or should be able to sort, query, filter this data, like what you start doing is you create this entire new paradigm for app development. And like one of my personal measurements for success is that like a developer 10 years from now who sits down to write an application, like one of the first things they do is like install Intuition. Because like why compete with large tech monoliths where like step one is hoard data and compete with your walled garden? Actually, step one should be like opt into this public data lake, which has this middleware, which like makes this data extremely accessible. And now no longer are we competing about like how much data can you extract from users. We're competing like how many problems can you solve? Like what can your application do that users find valuable? Not like how locked in can you get, and then how many like small companies can you acquire? Like it's an inherent, like the current system of app development iteration like is inherently like eating itself from the inside out. Like any form of innovation gets immediately acquired, baked in, and just like squeezed down to the current paradigm once again. So like the only way to escape, I think, that like gravitational black hole is like to sort of sidestep it and start opting into some new systems. And like I'll even give a really good example of that, because I think dog fooding is like probably one of the most important things any organization working on applications should be doing. So one of the ideas we had is that like I just said, like a decade from now, developers will want to, as step one, just like import and work natively on top of Intuition's application layer and middleware layer. And we were similarly building some applications like around, let's say, like trying to solve some of the fracturing of data and the fracturing of identities, so that like instead of having like 8 profiles, like you kind of have this one like mosaic of a person. And in doing so, we immediately bump into all of these data permissioning issues where like I can't go get data from Facebook, I can't go get data from Google, I can't go get data from Twitter for like under $3 million a year or whatever it is. So it's like, oh, okay, these guys don't want to play. Just like Microsoft and its AI didn't want to play with OpenAI, but OpenAI just kept doing its thing, and Microsoft had to pivot. So instead, we're playing really nicely with all of the like third-party sort of applications and platforms that have identity as part of them that give us access to their data and to their social data. And we're like, oh, sweet, like you're already opting into that open paradigm. Our thesis is that developers will continue to opt in, and like, wow, holy, like we are all forced to opt in ourselves. Like no better proof that this works than like us being in that exact same position and making that exact same decision. So I don't know where that rant really started, but like I like where it went.
Yeah, going off of that, so this might be a difficult question, but I'd like to see both a crypto native example and a non-crypto native example of a data point about Billy, for instance, the middleware between it, and then what application can you build with that data point on Intuition?
Yeah, super easy. So like, okay, let's say I am transacting in Web3. Let's say, I don't know. It's actually wild to me that we still use Venmo and other things to like send money when we're all crypto native. So but let's just say we solve that. It's like, okay, I want to send some money to Billy. Like, how do I know that this is actually me? Or how do you know that it's actually me? Like, you go to create your transaction in MetaMask, and what you see is a bunch of non-human readable jargon that really tells you nothing, and then you have to like look at the letters. You're like, all right, I think that like I copy pasted this right, and like the beginning letters are the same, the end letters are the same, so okay, like we're good to go. Like, that is wild. That can't be the user experience. And so what we need to do is we need intuition in all of our interactions. We need to see what our intuition is saying about the thing that we're interacting with. So when you go to perform the transaction in MetaMask, what if there was a tab that said, here's what your intuition is saying about the thing that you're interacting with? And then you're like, oh, like this thing has all these social connections. I'm actually following them on Twitter. Like, this is probably, like, based on the reputation and the profile of this thing, this is probably the thing that I'm trying to interact with. And so like the hope again is like, this should be integrated everywhere. Obviously, we will have like user interfaces that we built ourselves that we hope that you come and use. But like the point is, go to the point of interaction that already exists. Go to the places where people are already doing stuff and just like insert your intuition there, which is really just like decision-making technology, just like providing better data to people to inform their decisions a little bit more. So hopefully that covers like the Web3 case. I think the Web2 is like, an example I like to give in Web2 world is Amazon reviews. So I think like reviews, I don't want to box what we're doing into being a review thing, but it's so ripe for disruption that I have to talk about it. It's like, okay, I go to Amazon. Like the review game has just been gamified to hell, to the point where like I don't even know what to trust anymore. It's like, who is leaving reviews? I've never written an Amazon review. I've never written a Yelp review. I've never done a LinkedIn endorsement. I do 5 stars on Uber every time because I don't care. And if you look at the data, 97% of people are not contributing data to these platforms. And then conversely, all of us use that data every single day to make decisions in our everyday lives. And so like the problem is not that the data doesn't exist. The problem is that the data exists in our heads. Because if you come to me and you ask me about a person I've met or a product I've bought on Amazon or a restaurant I've been to, I can tell you about it, but we have to have a conversation. And so like our whole point is to like get that data out there and serve it to the user at the point of interaction. So in the Yelp example, or like the Amazon example, let's say I'm on Amazon, I'm viewing a product. Instead of seeing 1,000 reviews from anonymous accounts who I have no idea who they are, in this new paradigm of portable data and portable reputation and portable identity and social graphs, what if you could, I don't have an Amazon friends list. I can't like import my Twitter following to Amazon to see if people I follow on Twitter are saying things about things in Amazon. I want to go to the Amazon, let's say I'm looking for supplements, and I trust Dr. Huberman in the context of supplements. So we have these things called trust circles. You can like curate who you trust in different contexts. So I'm on Amazon and I'm in the category of supplements. My trust graph has like Dr. Huberman in it. And I see, oh, Dr. Huberman has recommended this supplement. That means more to me than 10,000 anonymous reviews from people I don't know or bots. Like, it means nothing. Like, even like, I don't know, people I don't really know that well, if I meet them in real life and they recommend a restaurant to me, that means more to me than all the reviews on Yelp. Like, sure, I'll check Yelp a little bit, but I'll probably trust their opinion just because I know they're a real person with real opinions. And so I think like that's the world that we're trying to build towards.
Matt, do you have any other?
I actually want to like deconstruct like something that Billy touched on, but I think he touched on it like through example. And that is like and this is kind of why I love the name intuition. It's like really like we tried to define it and then we were like, wait, it kind of defines itself. We all have friends, or at least I hope we all have friends. And like we put in investment in our friends in the form of time, in the form of energy, in the form of emotion, in the form of support. And like that forms bonds. And these bonds have like a certain scaling limit. And there's all sorts of ways in which we can discover the bonds of others, in that like somebody might host a dinner party or a birthday party, and you start to meet the other people that they have close bonds with. And you're in these trusted spaces, and you're able to, really sort of build a life. Essentially, like you have all these really positive externalities and positive outcomes if you're surrounded by good people and they're surrounded by good people. And like there's this whole thing that nature just evolved for us. And then we built social media, and it was like, oh, like follow whatever gives you the like hardest dopamine and serotonin hit immediately. And we like very unmindfully just started following and unfollowing like all over the place. And like for the most part, every type of connection is the same. And until maybe like 3 years ago, you couldn't even like now Twitter has like subscribe, right? And then like Instagram added like close circles to friends. Like they're starting to figure out that like there's more to just following and unfollowing, but nobody, and I mean nobody, has figured out how to properly model the very natural connections that we have in the real world online. And this goes back to like why I said like that incentive or economic piece is so important, because like if you take a step back and you think about like what we hold true about like free and open markets, and like the ability for to express an opinion with a monetary device, and that leading to some form of like optimal outcome. Well, like if we start to think about social graphs and knowledge graphs in the way that we think about the way that we connect with one another, and instead of putting in like time and energy, we use these like monetary devices to like show where connections are strongest. And like in intuition, right, we have things called claim, we have like identities, we have claims, you can stake on all these different things, like, and it doesn't need to be a person that does it. Like you can build bots to do this as well. But like you for the first time ever, you get to sort of model out like real world natural bonds online, right? Like, and we call this the intuition graph, right? And that is the intersection of like an economically driven social graph and an economically driven knowledge graph, and like these two things combined for what we call like the intuition graph. And like that's what's so exciting to me. And like I'm sort of really disinterested in like what like our core primitive features will do to Web 2 or Web 3. I'm much more interested in like what the next generation of developers are going to do when they have social bond data. Like what does interacting online, what does community formation look like at that time in the future? And honestly, if you guys have, I'll throw a question back to you guys. Like, what do you guys think community formation looks like in a paradigm like that?
Yeah, I think like circles of friends would just be like completely different, because like inherent knowledge of like what someone said about someone else or what someone did to someone else would just be integrated into intuition. So it's like, your association would go a lot less superficial across your circles.
One thing semi-related to this is that like when I first joined crypto, which is not as long as you guys, I had kind of a difficult time, I think, because when you first join, you kind of have like, you go on the timeline and there's just so many people just talking and you don't know who you can trust. And I feel like that's one of the big issues. And you have to wait. Like, you know how like the market has some form of a tuition? You have to kind of pay your tuition. You have to follow the horrible actors. And then eventually someone's like, oh, like XYZ actually once did this. So you shouldn't like take advice from him, or you shouldn't listen to him, or he dumped this. He like shilled this at the top or whatever. So I definitely see that like if there is, and according to you guys, there is a way of fixing this trust issue where I don't have to fight for my life to figure out who I can trust and who I can't trust. That's like very attractive. And I think it could like, even at the like the nicheest case of like onboarding people onto a new segment, a new industry, a new sector, like there I can see like how that could be extremely useful.
100%. And I'll provide an example there. And that's that I talk about this all the time, but it's like a new entrant to Web3 is entirely lost. Like, how do they know what to do? And the answer is they don't. And then they get trapped in something like Cardano hell, and then they never escape. And then they think crypto's a scam and they don't come back for 10 years. And so like that can't be the user experience that people have when they come into the ecosystem. And so I think like what would be very cool is, to your point, before you've curated right now you have personal social graphs. It's only you. Like, you can't toggle to someone else's social graph. But what if I come into crypto and I just know one data point? The only data point that I know is like, I trust this Vitalik guy. He seems like, I don't want to spend 24/7 trying to figure out the 3,000 people I need to follow. I just like, okay, I've been monitoring Vitalik for a little bit. Like, seems trustworthy. What if I could equip his lens through which to see the world? And then like, I just like automatically see my Twitter feed through his eyes and all the people that he follow. Like, that would be really nice. And then you wouldn't like fall into these pitfalls. And so if we take the social graph and instead of making it like agent centric, and we abstract it away from the platform, we abstract it away from the user, and they become objects in and of themselves that you can just like you can equip and you can overlay any data with. Now it's like, okay, now I'm in Amazon. I don't even have to curate my own supplement trust graph anymore. Like, I'm not gonna, maybe there's like, just like coin, if you go to Uniswap, there's like all the official coin lists. You got like CoinGecko list and CoinMarketCap list, and there's like a couple different like lists of reputable coins that you can choose from to like filter the coins that are automatically populated. Same thing here. It's like, oh, here's like a couple good trust graphs to choose from if you're viewing supplements. Like, here, pick this one. And so you don't really have to go through this like cumbersome. You can, if you want, you can create your own trust graphs. You can customize the existing ones. But I just think that to your point, it's not just useful for crypto. It's very useful for crypto because in crypto, the stakes are high. Because if you interact with the wrong thing, you lose all your money. So that's not great. And so like in other ecosystems, less scary. So we should probably start with Web3 first, where this is it's native to us. Like, this is where we have the most knowledge, we have the network, we have the connections, and the pain point is huge. So we're starting with Web3, but this can be extrapolated out to literally anything. It's like, oh, I find a new interest. Like, now I'm interested in pickleball, and it's like, okay, I need to like buy some pickleball equipment. I need to know where to play pickleball. Like, okay, how do I do this? I need to equip like pickleball trust graph that has been curated by somebody somewhere to overlay that data with.
Yeah, I agree. That makes sense. One thing that I feel like we've kind of brushed up on, but we've never actually delved deep into, and I feel like everybody's gonna want to know, is the incentive mechanisms, and like those 4 categories, kind of like talking a bit more about those and how exactly they interact with the protocol.
Yeah, so I'll touch on the economic piece last, because that's the most important and the most detailed. But the other ones are kind of like grog brain to grok. So I'll step sequentially through those in no particular order. So on the reputational front, and I'll keep using Amazon as an example to root things in something that has a Web2 parallel. So I don't leave reviews on Amazon. One of the reasons is I don't care about my Amazon reputation. Like, it doesn't get me anything. I can buy whatever I want on Amazon without being like a good reviewer of products. So I don't care about my Amazon reputation. But what if reputation was cross-context and cross-platform? What if I could use the fact that I'm a good reviewer on Amazon and like get an uncollateralized loan in DeFi, or like do something somewhere else? Like, that might be interesting to me. Like, now I might like go around all these different contexts and be a good actor in these different systems because my reputation within those systems means something outside of the context of those systems. So now I might leave reviews because like I'm building up my reputation. There's inherent economic, there's like just inherent, I don't even want to just say economic value, but just like value in this reputation. Because if I ruin my reputation, I've let's say I spent 10 years building up this fact that I'm a good reviewer on Amazon. I'm not going to destroy that for like a $1,000 under collateralized loan. Like, my time is worth so much more than that. And so there's so much that you can do with portable reputation, and it might get you to do things because you care about your reputation more now. Second is educational. So another reason I don't leave reviews on Amazon is because it's just going to get lost in the sea of Amazon. I don't have an Amazon friends list. My friends will never see the fact that I've left this review. And those are the people that I care about the information getting to. Like, I'll go in the group chat and be like, yo, you should definitely like buy this thing. Like, this product's sick. Or have a conversation with someone and be like, yo, you should totally go to this restaurant. Like, I don't leave the review on Yelp, but I will tell people like, oh, this is a great restaurant in Puerto Rico. Go there. And so it's because it gets lost because we're not filtering the data correctly. We don't have these trust graphs. So again, it's like, okay, if I could overlay the stuff with my trust graph or my social graph, and it's like, oh, like, okay, I see that Billy has recommended this restaurant. Great. Maybe I will be more inclined to disseminate the information at the point of interaction versus in these other platforms. Like, the information is getting disseminated. It's just getting disseminated in the wrong spots and via the wrong mediums. So that's kind of like the educational piece. The functional piece is maybe I just want to make a claim about something because it's useful to me. So going back to my angel investing advisory example, it's like I was tagging things with things and making claims about things because it helped me organize my own life. And by proxy, it organized it for everyone else. But it was just like a useful tool to me. So I think this is the pillar that even if we just get this one right, that solves everything else. But it's like, we have to solve real pain points for end users. We have to give them the ability to do something that they couldn't do before. And if we provide them the best user experience in doing that thing, they're going to do it regardless of the couple dollars they make from it or from their reputation. It's just like, I'm just going to do this because it's useful to me for some way. So that's the functional. The economic is where like the crypto innovation comes in. And this is what sparked the idea of intuition. But basically in intuition, because now we have verifiable attribution of who created the data, you can do very interesting things with economic flows. So now that we know who created the data, we can flow any revenue that the data creates back to the data creator. And so what happens in intuition, Matt mentioned we have like identities and claims. I won't go into like the technical nuances of what each of those things are. I'll just keep it high level so that Matt doesn't yell at me. But like basically when you create data, you get ownership in that data. And then anytime anyone interacts with that data, if they're paying money to do that interaction, the money flows back to you. And so why this is so important is because let's take the paradigm right now of Google and Facebook and Twitter monetizing all this data. They're able to do it because they have the workforce to aggregate, cleanse, and sell the data as like a big package. But me as like an end user, my data is probably like not worth that much. It's made, I don't know, a couple dollars. And so I can't go through the effort of like selling it to people. You kind of have to create this like programmatic marketplace where I'm just automatically rewarded for having created the data in the first place. And so in this new model, it's like any piece of data I create, whenever that piece of data is interacted with in some way, like I'm getting rewarded for doing it. And it's not gamifiable because it's zero sum because someone's paying on the other side. And the reason why it like in the system, the way that you combat Sybil attacks or DOS attacks or just people flooding the network with bad data is there's some small inherent fee to creating the data in the first place. So just taking all of the learnings from blockchain, think of it just like a gas cost. Like to create data, there's some inherent cost to storing the data. It's not free. So if we made it free, then someone's paying it and then it's us. And then we have to be these intermediaries that extract value from people to pay the data storage costs. So the user pays small fee. Maybe it's a fraction of a penny, whatever. It's just like not something, but there is some cost, like a gas fee, that you pay to create the data. And the money that you pay to create the data purchases you ownership in the data. And so then, like, because now we have private keys that we can sign things with through the proliferation of PKI as introduced through crypto, it's like, okay, we all have private keys that we can sign stuff with. Lots of people are signing transactions on blockchains right now with those private keys, but you can sign anything with those private keys. So we can sign data with those private keys. And when we sign data with the private keys, then we know who created the data in the first place. And so that was a very long-winded rant. I hope that made sense. I'll pass it over to Matt now to reel us back in.
Yeah, I'm known for reeling us back in. So again, where the current paradigm has failed, like objectively, is that users are essentially bucketed into one of two categories, right? You're either a content creator or you're a content consumer, or I guess you can be both, but like those are the two large categories. And the measurement of success, right, is like virality or interaction. Like it would be like as if we tried to, like, if I wanted to solve world hunger and then like all I did was measure like how many calories I shipped to another country, like, and then they just took that food and threw it in the ocean. Like that's the current process of like trying to create good content. It's like we're solving world hunger, but we're not measuring hunger. And the other issue is that like it's not just a world of content creators and content consumers. You have content aggregators, you have content curators. You now have like the entire advent of AI, right? So now you have task-oriented agents. They are completely disinterested in like human emotion, like as agents, right? So like they're not going to interact or respond because something makes them anxious or something, you know, makes them feel disgust or happiness, right? Like they're not attuned to those types of triggers that would, you know, cause quote unquote like interaction. And then you have like algorithm designers, right? So like if you actually start thinking about like what incentive design needs to look like, and it might sound like I'm really focused on social media. I'm not. I'm really focused on the interactions of parties online, right? I'm much so interested in like the intersection of social graphs and knowledge graphs, but that just so happens to be what social media really is, right? It's like a pretty front end on the intersection of a social graph and a knowledge graph. And we're thinking about incentives in terms of like, what are these different types of identity categories, right? Like we have a whole section for AI, we have a whole section for human, we have a whole section for other like objects, right? And like each of these things need to have some different way of interacting and some different way of being an economic participant to create, again, like this highly consumable, highly efficient form of data, right? Like going back to this oil gets turned into natural gas can get burned for energy, and like each form of refinement has some type of different like energy output and some different type of carbon footprint. And similarly, like every distillation or refinement of raw data like has some different potential for application, can have some different form of impact, can be more expensive or less expensive to access or use. And then, of course, there'll be people who probably want to forego the economic incentive outright, perhaps because they're trying to grow following more quickly or something of that nature. So, like, I really can't, like, bold and underline enough how important it is to recognize, like, how failed the current status quo is when it comes to social interaction, identity fragmentation, and, like, data discoverability. Like, my biggest thing and I just started doing this like literally a week ago. We all point to Google and Google search all the time. And like we even had a brainstorming meeting on some naming, and like something came up like search engine, and someone was like, whoa, like we don't want to compete with like being a search engine. Like that's like going into Google. Like how are you going to compete with Google? And then I paused and I was like, wait, can we all agree that discoverability in Google search over the past 3 to 5, 6 years has gotten significantly worse? Right? Can we, like, does everybody feel like it's much more difficult to get your questions answered and to get the resources you want on Google than it used to be? So, like, why are we scared to say that we're competing with discoverability and search when actually search and discoverability are degrading because the basic incentive systems behind them have like played out to their logical conclusions, and their logical conclusions were like bad data, bad outcomes, right? Whatever you measure for is what you get, and they measured for the wrong thing. So I think like there's a massive multi-trillion-dollar opportunity for like a protocol that is focused on like good data and data sovereignty to like really step in. And like I hope to look back on this conversation like 10 years from now and be like, wow, I can't believe we nailed it. But I mean, the odds of that are so low. But like that's where I really think, like, at least for me, the focus of the conversation like really is today.
Yeah, and I'd love to piggyback on that, on the economic incentive piece, because I think about it in terms of like things that we are doing as intuition, and I box things into that category, but like zooming out like Matt did. So to elaborate on his point, basically the games that we're playing online, and I use the term game extremely loosely, but like our online experiences they have been crafted in a way in which they are not extracting like the best data and the best versions of ourselves from us and our best intuition. Like they have very perverse incentives, and what they're optimizing for, to Matt's point, is not like the production of good, useful data for society. They're optimizing for anxiety, like more clicks. It's like whatever gets the clicks, whatever keeps people dopamine receptors firing, like, but not too much, because if it's too much, then they won't come back. So it's just like, you always get this feeling. You go on your phone, you're on TikTok, and you feel like kind of satiated, and then you get off and you just like feel like shit, and you're like, oh, what is going on here? Like, why do I feel worse when I was supposed to be doing something that like was supposed to make me feel better? Like, what am I doing here? And people have just been trapped in this mindset because these very powerful companies are using these very powerful tools to create these games that everyone's playing, and they don't even know they're trapped, which is so sad. And we have to we kind of have to zoom out, and we have to wake up, and we have to be like, hey, the system's kind of broken. It's kind of ruining people's lives across the board. Like, look at everyone's screen time on their phones. Like, how much of that screen time is creating like real world productive value? And I'd probably argue not very much of it. And so that's what we have to think about, is this system that is fundamentally broken because the incentives are perverse, because people are optimizing for the wrong things. And so what we have to optimize for, in order to build a good system, what you have to do is you have to align the objectives of the system with the objectives of the people. And if you can build a system where people are acting in their own best self-interest, and by proxy are acting in the best interest of the system, then you've built a good system. So taking Bitcoin, for instance, that's so beautiful. That's why I got obsessed with Bitcoin so early, because I thought this concept was so beautiful. It's like, if you just act individualistically and greedily, and you act in your own best self-interest, that is what's in the best interest of Bitcoin, the system. Like, if you come to consensus and you mine like the longest chain, if you converge on social consensus, then you make money. If you diverge and you act wrongly, because like there's no economic incentive to diverge, so why would you do it? And that's what is worse for the system. So Bitcoin very beautifully aligned the incentives of the network participants and the system itself. And there's just this mismatch right now where like the companies have one thing, people's incentives or like people's reason for interacting with them are something totally different. And so we have to have drastic change soon, because the world's starting to look like kind of weird. Like weird. It's just like, it's getting like weirder every day. And so I really think we got to wake up and like have some sense of urgency about this before we're in like some weird backwards land where nothing makes sense anymore.
Yeah. Talking about perverse incentives, I think this is like the most obvious when you go on those popular tweets, and under them it's just like maybe a dozen, like maybe 20, 25 of these like videos of, it's either cute dogs, etc., which are like gonna garner views, or it's like some horrific like crime video or something. And because I think like that whole, when the Elon bucks came online, that like really kind of exasperated the whole incentive, I think, a bit more than what it was like, because before it was a bit sneaky, it was like it wasn't as obvious, but now it's like my For You page is just absolutely horrendous all the time. I think one of the questions that I've had from the very beginning is because Matt kept touching up on refining oil. How do you, the middleware layer refines the data, from what I understand. Could you, are the incentive systems the same there, or are you going to be building your own solution as well? I know you talked a bit about like dev tools and etc., but how are you guys planning on making that as easy as possible so that you get refined data out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so like programmatic rewards at the middleware layer are a little bit harder to deal with. And we haven't kind of like really broached that topic yet, but there's like indirect non-intuition rewards at the middleware layer that people are competing for. So if you think of Ethereum, it's like, okay, you could look at raw block data. No one does that. And so you've got like lots of players that make money from playing in the middle. You've got Infura and Alchemy and Etherscan and Dune and Nansen, and like literally most companies in blockchain are doing this in some way. And it's like the economic incentives are inherently there if the data is good. And I would love to find some way to kind of programmatically reward the development of that stuff at the protocol layer. But I don't think we need those incentives at the onset, because they're just like intrinsic to the system. And what the middleware looks like, it's just I mean, what we're building is just a set of extensible APIs and SDKs that just let you build on top of this stuff very easily. So it's like, okay, you've got this composition of all these verifiable data registries. You've got data coming in from all these different places. You've got it being stored in different formats. Some things need to happen off chain. Some things need to happen on chain. They're just like, the flow is relatively complex. And so the middleware that we're building kind of reduces that complexity down to like single API call. So it's like create identity for a thing. You don't have to worry about like all the other crazy things that are happening when you're creating an identity. You just like call create identity, and it's nice. And our goal is to kind of like make that as extensible and permissionless as possible. So it's not just like us building those things, it's everyone building them. And then also like on the, I guess this is probably a little bit too technical, but it's just like on the indexing front. So it's like, okay, data moving to lots of different places. Our like indexer infrastructure relatively centralized right now, but the hope is like, just like in the way that people are approaching decentralization right now across the board, it's like you can replicate the state if you want to. So we'll open source our indexers, and like if you want to like replicate the state and verify that everything is like the way that we say it is, you can very easily do that. But in this in the system we're trying to build, it's very hard to build like a decentralized version of a vector database or a decentralized version of a graph database. And so we kind of have, there's like centralization points at the middleware layer, but the hope is like our middleware also makes it very easy for developers to replicate the state that we're working with in our like database that are kind of like a little bit more centralized, because we don't really know how to make that layer of the stack decentralized yet.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And it aligns like with the rest of crypto and like the entire experience of distributed systems. Looking forward, so fast forward like 5 years, what sort of scale do you hope Intuition achieves? Like what are some practical applications you expect to see you hope to see 5 years from now? And like where does that position Intuition as a protocol?
Matt, I'll let you take that one.
Oh man, that's a dangerous one for me to answer. So what we haven't touched on is network effects. Specifically, like Billy earlier outlined that like kind of in the beginning it's B2C and then it's like more B2B, but like it's I think more accurately portrayed as B2B2C, which was like actually like a core flow back when like Apple was innovating. And each additional application that builds on top of Intuition becomes another node to feed data to like the open permissionless knowledge graph and social graph, right? The Intuition graph, and also becomes a node to like disseminate that information. So if we succeed in bootstrapping an ecosystem over the next 5 years, like I think a very positive outcome would be like 1 billion users interacting with Intuition, not directly, right? Like there's going to be an ecosystem of applications on top, and I would hope that aggregate is at least 1 billion users. Looking at how we continue to get steeper and steeper on adoption curves because of these network effects, like if you look at how quickly like Instagram acquired users versus TikTok versus OpenAI, like these network effects are getting like nastier. And I mean that in a positive sense, like they're getting more violent. And I think we're taking like one of the most hands-off approaches, meaning that like scale can go, like we're not the limiting factor, right? Like it's not about our ability to like get products over. It's just about our ability to build an ecosystem like over the next 3 to 4 years until it has some form of like organic traction that gives it that hockey stick inflection. I would also really like to see Intuition supported as like a widely supported single form of like login, like in at least like call it 1/3 of new applications where like I don't I can kind of roll up a bunch of my identities under Intuition, and then like use that intuition key, like that master key, to like do things. And like I'd even love to start permissioning data or like having preferences stored within intuition. Like how come when I go to a new platform, I have to like start at zero? Like why do I need to rebuild my follow list? Why does it algorithms need to like pay attention to me for like a month to figure out that like I'm in the market for like a new pair of shoes or whatever? Like I just like pick up where I left off. Like let me just like hand over like, you know, the like avatar style, like plug into like this new application I'm using. I don't think that's 5 years out. I think that might be more like 7 to 10 years out. But then again, I have no idea, because like AI is definitely a sector that we're like very interested in supporting. And like, I think we're thinking about it in a very innovative way. And I just don't think there's that many people thinking about, or rather like building in the cross section between like verifiable data and like thinking about AI agents at the same time. And I think people are drastically underestimating how quickly that's going to continue to grow, which might mean that I'm also underestimating like potential for growth. But like, I don't know, the future is tough to predict.
Yeah, very tough to predict. So wrapping up here, I guess what we learned is that intuition is creating this distributed framework for creating these portable reputations and preferences, packaging that and driving the monetization of that towards the suppliers of the data themselves versus the collectors. Where can someone who's listening to this learn more about intuition, keep up with intuition, and when can we expect to actually start intuitioning?
To add on to that, is there anything actionable at the moment that people can look into as well?
Matt, with your like cool, calm, collected radio voice, do you want to do a little pitch?
I definitely don't have a voice for radio.
It's the microphone.
It's the
working
microphone. It's
wonders. Yeah, it sounds so good.
Follow on Twitter. Go to the website. And I think more than anything over the next few weeks, like honestly, put notifications on for the Twitter. And like, I know that kind of sounds like kind of cringe, like, oh yeah, like put notifications on our Twitter, like we're really so important. But like, honestly, like all I have to, like over the next few weeks, I think it would be like really beneficial to like be early to some of our content. So yeah, to interact with intuition, that's coming very soon. There's been years of work being done that is ready for the public spotlight, and a really fun and engaging, should I say, like rollout strategy. Like hopefully from this conversation, like people have understood that I think we're thinking a little bit differently, and we also think about our go-to-market strategy differently. And we think about like what rolling an application out in like 2024 in crypto looks like. And it doesn't look like it did in 2021 or 2020 or 2018 or 2016. Like each cycle had its own viral way in which you discovered and interacted with new platforms. And I think very, very few builders right now are getting it right. I hope we get it right. I don't know if we'll find out pretty soon. But like obviously there's been a lot of frustration with a lot of like people who've been in this space for a while, with like the bifurcation between attention going to like memes or like Bitcoin, and everyone in the middle is like kind of scratching their head what to do. And I think like that's probably a failure to innovate and a failure to adapt. So like I look forward to like our iteration cycle, getting this product out into the world, getting people interacting, and like everything else we got going for the rest of this year. So yeah, follow on Twitter, turn on notifications. Go to our website. There's a link to our Discord on the website. I think those are all the most major platforms. Maybe DM Billy if you want to work with us. Like if this sounded interesting and you want to build on intuition, like we are about to open up documentation for those APIs and SDKs. So hit up Billy.
Yeah, that was perfect. And I guess like to add a little bit onto that, Twitter is OX Intuition. Website is intuition.systems for those of you who are just listening to this and don't have a link to a thing for some reason. And then, yeah, to Matt's point, we've got what I think is a very creative rollout strategy where we are incrementally introducing people to the functionalities and primitives of intuition over time in these bite-sized pieces. So all you got to do is follow along, and all you got to do is play the game that you're presented with at that moment in time. And then over time, those might coalesce into something that like was unexpectedly beautiful. So we'll see how it plays out, but that is our strategy.
Great. Thanks so much for hopping on. It was a pleasure.
Thank you
Awesome.
guys. This is awesome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you guys are great.
We have teamed up with the Wormhole Foundation, stewards of the Wormhole protocol, the leading interoperability platform powering cross-chain transfers for over 200 plus multi-chain dApps. Wormhole isn't just a bridge, it's the leading interoperability platform for multi-chain applications. So go and claim your unique Wormhole NFTs just for 0x Research listeners today. Hit the link in the description to fill out a form and to prove that you've listened to today's episode and receive a POAP. You get an email over the coming weeks to claim your limited edition NFT.